everyone, it's Carrie here, and thank you so much for joining me for another weekly dose of inspiration to help you grow your business. So, as entrepreneurs, one of the most important things we have to do is raise awareness of our business. But I find this can sometimes be the most challenging thing to do. However, one of the most powerful ways we can actually raise awareness of our business is through getting publicity, through PR. Yeah, I feel like this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't actually utilize. So in this episode, we are talking all about how you can get more publicity for your business. And we are joined by Andreea Ayers, who is the founder of launchgrowjoy.com. And she's going to be sharing some of her amazing tips on how we can do this. So Andreea, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Carrie.
So obviously, aside from teaching entrepreneurs how to actually get publicity for their business, you also do this in your own business through a business you started last year, which is Soaps to Live By. And I actually went on the website and I clicked on the press section and I saw like all of these magazines you've been featured in, all these websites you've been featured on. I was like, oh my goodness, how has she done this in such a short space of time? So I thought it'd be really powerful if you could share that story with us of how you actually started that business and then got all that publicity for it.
Sure. So I feel like I kind of had an unfair advantage when it comes to that because I had started a t-shirt business in 2007. And through that t-shirt business, I realized and I learned the power of publicity. So I feel like I learned everything I need to know about publicity with my t-shirt business. So then I ended up selling that t-shirt business in 2011. And then teaching entrepreneurs how to get publicity for their products and their brand. And then when I launched my soap business, I feel like I already knew what I was going to do and I had a publicity plan in place. So I was deciding when I should launch my business, and I realized that because those are soaps and they were more on the upscale price and a little more high end, I thought that they would make a perfect gift for the holidays. So I decided to launch specifically in June because June and July is when magazines are working on their holiday gift guide. So I sort of planned a little bit ahead of time, and in some ways it was good because I think if I didn't have that deadline, I probably would have launched a few months later and just delayed it, as you know, it happens all the time. So I started, and for the first 2 months of my business, getting publicity was the only thing I did in my business. So I emailed magazines, I reached out, I sent a ton of samples, I found out what items they were looking for their gift guides, and then that's how I was able to get featured. So it wasn't always this way. When I started my t-shirt business, it took me a few years to learn that. And I actually started out with reaching out to bloggers and asking them if they wanted to review my t-shirts. And then I realized that as these bloggers were writing about my t-shirts and sending traffic back to my site, that my following would increase, my newsletter signups would increase, and my sales would increase as well. So I thought, maybe I'm onto something here. I mean, I feel like entrepreneurs that have been doing this for a long time already know this, but all of this was so new to me at the time. So I thought, what if I focus more on top magazines and blogs that have a bigger circulation? Imagine the amount of sales that I can get from there and the impact that I can make. So I slowly learned how to reach out to press, what to say. I learned about editorial calendars and pitching. And when I launched the soap line, I already knew what to do, I guess, from my t-shirt experience.
Wow, and clearly it obviously worked. Because when I went on there, you've been featured in so many places. Like I was like, oh my goodness, I need to know how she's doing this. So obviously, like publicity is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't really know how to do, or maybe it's that they think, well, no one would be interested in my story, or I need to wait till I make things even more amazing before people would be interested in my story. And obviously other reasons. Some people try with publicity but just don't seem to figure it out, like how to make it work successfully. So what are the things that you can share with us, and what things can people start doing today to really help them to get more publicity in their business?
Yeah, so I think that's such a good question. I think the first thing they need to realize is that if I can do it, you can do it. And I'm not just saying that because I already have a ton of press mentions, but I really started out with no knowledge of this. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs assume because they don't have a big budget or they're not a big brand, then they're not going to get publicity and they're not going to get featured. But I think changing your mindset to, even though you're just starting out or you're a smaller company or an entrepreneur, you still can get publicity. So just knowing that you can do it too, I think is the first step, and believing that you have a great story that's going to make an impact and it's going to touch someone. and grab someone in. And I think magazine editors, they definitely feature those big brands that may not necessarily have the kind of story that you have, but when they're looking for smaller companies and more unique products, which they are looking for all the time, they're looking for products like yours that have a really interesting story. So I think thinking outside the box and knowing you can do it, and then making sure you have a good story to tell, are the ways you can start. Once you do that, the next step is to make a list of all of the publications that you want to get featured in. And your list might be small. It maybe can only be 5 things, or it can be 10 different outlets, or it can be 50. I know with my soaps, I had 200 media outlets that I wanted to be featured in. So I started out with a really long list. And then once you make that list of your dream outlets, and this should include both magazines and influential blogs, and even smaller blogs as well. I think there's a lot of value in having a wide variety of press. Then it's time to find out what those magazines or blogs are going to be looking for, but also to get to know the contents that they feature. So a lot of the magazines that are probably on your list are going to be things that you're familiar with, because maybe you read them or you've heard about them. But if you're not familiar with a publication, the next step is to really get familiar with them and think about, where do you think your products or services would be a good fit? For example, in a fashion magazine, would they be a good fit maybe in the new product section, or maybe something items for spring? So just think about where you can see your products featured on those pages, and then start researching who the editor responsible for that page is. And that can be as simple as reading past articles, and sometimes it'll say who put that section together. Other times you can look at the masthead of the magazine, and it tells you maybe who the fashion editor is or who the lifestyle editor is. And if you still don't have enough information there, really you can call up the magazine and say, I'm an entrepreneur, I'd love to submit my product, and I'd love to get them in the section. Which editor is responsible for that section? And they really will give you that information. So it is really as simple as making a phone call or doing research online about who you should contact.
Yeah.
And then once you have that information, the next step is to put an email pitch together. And I don't recommend calling by phone or sending a fax or sending a package first. I always recommend reaching out via email. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that most editors that I spoke with, I would say 99.9% of them would prefer to be pitched by email and not by phone. So that's the first reason. The second one is that what happens a lot of times, they print out emails and print out photos, and they take those to their weekly meetings and staff meetings to decide what products to feature. So by sending an email, you make it super easy for them to just print it out, take it to their meeting, and hopefully talk about you and discuss your products, and with the end goal of featuring them. And then once you figure out which section of the magazine you want to be in, or which feature, it's really all about emailing the editor and saying, hey, I love your magazine. It's always great to start out with either a compliment or letting them know that you're familiar with their magazine, so you can reference an article that they wrote, or maybe a recent feature that they did, or congratulate them on something. And then say, if you're working, or if you're looking for holiday gifts, for example, when I was pitching for my holiday gift guide, if you're looking for holiday gifts, I'd love to suggest my organic handcrafted soaps. And then I kept it really simple. It was about 3 to 4 paragraphs of maybe like 2 to 4 sentences each paragraph, and just told her why I thought her readers would love to know about my products and to give them as gifts. So it's all about sending something that's relevant to what they're working on at the time. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs just send a press release because that's, you think of PR, you automatically think press release, and just blasting out your press release to hundreds of media outlets. But it's about just sending that initial email with a pitch specific to a story that they're working on at the time.
Yeah, that's the time I got featured in a newspaper in England was when I had this Google alert set up so that I could see every time someone online was writing about female entrepreneurs or anything to do with female entrepreneurship. And this article popped up about how the number of female entrepreneurs had come to a standstill. So I was literally on it so quickly and like finding out who is this journalist writing this, and then trying to research to find out his contact details. And I think I ended up having to guess his email address, but then somehow managed, it worked, and put the title of his article in the subject line and then said, I've just read your article, and like gave my opinion on it and thought it was great, but I thought that female entrepreneurs weren't coming to a standstill. And it was amazing, like left my phone number and he just called me straight away to do a piece on it. So I feel like that is definitely, because then you start to build rapport with those people. It's more personal. So I love that tip. I think that people just need to like get out and like pick up the phone and believe, like you said exactly at the beginning, like believe that you can do it, believe that people will be interested in your story or what you have to share or your products. So thank you so much for sharing those tips with us. Are there any other tips that you have to share?
Sure. So one other tip that I want to share is that it's really important to follow up. And what happens a lot of times is we assume that if we send out an email or make a phone call and we don't get a response, we just assume that they're not interested, and we sort of give up on that, give up on following up. And I've done that a million times with my t-shirt business until I realized that once I started to follow up, that's when most of the responses came in. So it was quite interesting to realize that it's not often in the initial email or the initial call that you make. It's often when you follow up. And I think following up also shows the reporter that you really are serious about this, and you want to, you want to help them find product. You're a serious entrepreneur, and you're going to follow up on something that's important to you. So I think if I had one tip to share with everybody, it would be to definitely follow up and not assume that they're not interested just because they don't write back. And I usually would wait about a week to follow up. And if you still don't hear back, then I think you can kind of take that as a no, but that's not a no that you'll never be featured in that publication. It's just, it's not a good fit for right now. So maybe think about a different story angle, maybe like a Mother's Day gift or a Valentine's Day gift or a spring fashion, or depending on what product you're selling. But think about what other pitch ideas you can have, and then approach them with a different idea a couple of months later. But don't give up just because you don't hear anything back.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all those tips. They are so powerful, and we could all take action on them right away. In fact, I'm definitely going to. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you want to find out more about Andreea, then head over to her website, launchgrowjoy.com. I've left all the details over on the blog, and I'd love to hear what you think about this too. Have you struggled in the past to really raise awareness of your business? And if so, what has helped you to overcome it? If you have any publicity stories, then head over to the blog and leave a comment. And I will see you next week for another dose of inspiration.